Welcome back to the second episode of the Economic Times Global Sustainability Alliance SDG Summit 2022.
Every single thing all around us is being reimagined as we speak. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why Futurescape has brought about this climate leadership report. And this is in continuation of 9 years of our work. And every single year for 9 years, we've taken out a leadership rankings of India's top companies that focuses on sustainability. And the reason for that was that we wanted to study what organizations actually do. What do they report on? What do they say? And are they really serious when they talk about sustainability? That's the reason why we focused on India's top companies every year and brought about this ranking. Over time, the rankings have shifted. When I say shifted, meaning that the methodology has gone from studying sustainability, it's gone from studying CSR, it's gone towards ESG. And this year, we've sharpened our focus and focused solely on climate leadership, which is emissions. What are companies doing? Because ESG has so many parameters. It has environmental parameters, social parameters. It also talks about governance. So then the menu and the platter becomes really large for us to understand and study. What we found out over years that ESG has certainly taken center stage in corporate boardrooms. But climate change and emissions and the focus on that has not really gone towards value chains.
The event started with a thought-provoking panel discussion on the topic, Role of Government in Achieving 2030 SDG Goals. Here are some highlights.
Sustainable Development Goals or climate change, that's really the hot topic today. We have a target before us of 2030, and it's not just about climate change and sustainable development goals, it's also about inclusivity, it's about women, it's about children, it's about financing, a whole lot of things that are really coming together.
We have this Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, under which almost 85 crore people are being given during COVID times, and the scheme is still continuing, where we are giving food grains, dalhans, at times states are giving edible oil also. We have this Ujjwala scheme for the gas connections in the rural areas. So the schemes for zero hunger have been very effective. We have this Anganwadi scheme from the ministry, which is a universal scheme. So anyone, any child up to the age of 6 years, any pregnant women or lactating mother can go to Anganwadi centers and they can get their food there.
In aviation, what are the specific solutions in the entire aviation ecosystem? Roads, constructions, marine, many of the different sectors, and to come back and design integrated solutions for the sector to come back and decarbonize. We work in coalitions. We want to work and build partnerships with a number of different companies to be able to work across the value chain and see how do we give customers and consumers freedom of choice and flexibility, and to redesign the value chain to come back and say how can we innovate to be much more circular in our nature and to reduce our emissions going forward. And lastly, we want to work and become a thought partner in our ecosystem, which means working with think tanks, working with government organizations to come back and make climate-focused policy and advocacy so that we can create an enabling environment for the businesses to succeed and grow.
Thermax is committed to energy and environment sector, especially environment, and we believe in sustainable development. So in order to support ESG, Thermax has committed itself, and we have decided to have all our locations have recycle plants. We are using it in our factories, we are doing it in our offices, and we also deploy rainwater harvesting so that our dependence on source of water reduces and we are able to use more and more from what nature has given us. Not only this, Thermax extends this even to our customers. We have wide array of technologies which can be deployed at our customer premises, like zero liquid discharge with using minimal energy. The recent invention which we have done in this area is MVR, where you are actually able to use less energy to recycle water.
So sustainability strategy is extremely important to drive low carbon manufacturing, sustainable supply chains, and circularity in the entire manufacturing ecosystem.
Now, sector leaders in the industry are actually relying on emerging technologies around AI, blockchain, and digital transformation to drive some of these changes. And these technologies will play a big role in ensuring that we accelerate our progress to net zero. At IBM, we actually focus on we've created what's called as an IBM Garage for Sustainability. It is a co-creation methodology, it's a co-creation template where we bring in all the stakeholders, the industry experts, technology leaders, and all the stakeholders together on a platform to drive innovation towards creating sustainable ecosystems.
The event was followed by an interesting panel discussion on the topic, a blueprint for scaling voluntary carbon markets.
2015-16, when Paris Climate Agreement was signed, as per Article 6 of the agreement, it was decided that again, whole globe should develop international carbon market. Because of one or other reason, this could not be developed, but now it's quite possible that in COP27, which is to be held in Egypt in November, this international carbon market would come in place, and that would again enable the companies and the countries of developing world to create such project by which many, again I would say, economically unviable project can be implemented to bring down CO2 emissions.
Whether or not we believe that Mother Earth as a system can go to absolute zero or not, along the way in the transition, offsets are going to play a critically important role. In other words, there are people who may or may not be able to decarbonize all of their operations, but there may be people who generate, I'd say, a negative carbon footprint who might then be able to offset these. So I think the ability of these counterparties to talk to each other and say, between us, we get to net zero. I think that's where carbon credits are going to play a critical role.
Next in line was a special address by Anil Kumar Chalamalasetti, Chief Executive and Managing Director, Greenco.
Today, India's installed capacity generation is 405 gigawatts. Of that, 235 gigawatts is fossil-based and 170 gigawatts is non-fossil-based. Out of which 100 gigawatts is wind and solar, and small hydros is 15 gigawatts, large hydros are 47 gigawatts, and 8 gigawatts of nuclear. India's energy market is approximately $2,000 billion, of which electricity participates only 18%. And in which, again, RE market is hardly $4 billion on a per annum basis. After $200 billion of a USD energy market, close to $160 billion is from the oil and gas markets. It's a great opportunity for renewable, given the technologies which have been advancing globally, and given the opportunities how the global decarbonization has been accelerating, and how India is, given the resources availability, how we can participate into the 160 billion market from a 4 billion market.
Embedding circularity into business strategy and operations was the next topic for an interesting panel discussion where the speakers gave an insight on the business strategy.
I think as Rolls-Royce is the supplier of energy and power systems across aviation, energy, transportation, defense, many others, I'm sure, distinct from the Rolls-Royce motors for the benefit of the audience. So you are front and center in terms of the energy and power systems that are getting used. You have taken a net zero target for 2030 for yourself. And more interestingly, you have committed to 2050 enabling your clients for their net zero. So let me start off with that. If you can share some things about what you're doing in terms of your own manufacturing for achieving the net zero, and then maybe we'll quickly come to how do you see the future playing out in terms of enabling your clients in terms of the new sustainable technologies that are coming up and that you're investing in. But let's start with the 2030 journey that you have set yourself up for.
It becomes extremely important for us to understand the impact that we have as a company on the environment and on the journey towards sustainability. And when we look at it in Rolls-Royce, we have to firstly have the intent to do something. And intent for us is basically to say, what is it that we are willing to commit to? And we started this by saying we will commit to the 2050 net zero goals of the UN Charter. And I think This is a big step, but 2050 is still some ways out there. But I believe, and Rolls-Royce believes completely, that intent is great. It's a starting point. But from intent, we have to move to the next level, which is to implement things. And when we talk about implementing things, firstly, we have said by year 2023, a lot of our current products will be SAF compatible. We have also committed by 2025, we'll have a lot of our existing factories moving towards the net zero charter.
In line, the event was followed by a thought-provoking discussion on the topic, every hour, every day, everywhere. Here are some highlights.
As I said, for whatever reasons, hydroelectric power is actually a no-no. I mean, I personally think that technically you can probably do it, but I think that socially you're going to have immense resistance if you try to dam rivers right now. So what is left is that we either try to get coal to be green, which is carbon capture and utilization, or you have to try to get solar, which we have fairly large, along with some storage. Because what people need to realize is the PLF, or the load factor of solar, is 18-20%. And there are large times of the day or months where you may not get any solar power. So you need to have some sort of a storage of energy that can then supplement and hence get you to balance the load.
India has a great opportunity to become lowest cost carbon free globally. In India, we can aspire to become carbon free energy, including storage, at less than $50 per megawatt hour. In US, in the numbers we did, comes to more than $100. Europe is much more expensive. Probably only China is the only other market which can compete with India, or India can try to compete with them. So once you have carbon free at $50 levels, the downstream scenarios, which can be global products, commodities and molecules, has that puts us in a very different position from a global opportunity to export our products.
We have already discussion in 3 states, and there we are telling to them, you give me your requirement of 2025 in every hour block, every 15-minute block, and I will follow your load with the renewal and storage. We already got the order of 3 states, and we will shortly issue the tender. Once able to prove this, I can supply the conventional power as coal, as a renewal, then people will have the belief on us, and they will then believe on the renewal, and then carbon neutral is very much possible. That is our thinking.
So we strongly believe that going forward, renewable energy is going to play an important role, and we want to be part of this roadmap, this journey of decarbonization, and how we can effectively use our gases to really decarbonize. Number one. Number two, how we can embrace the new technologies in terms of green hydrogen, how we can use basically the renewable power to generate green hydrogen, how we can sort of take a leap of faith in terms of moving from grey to green. We believe that blue can play an important driver. So we are focusing so much on capturing our CO2 and then to utilize this CO2. So we are evaluating chemical route wherein we are trying to make methanol or ethanol out of this. Then we are also taking biological route where we are going to make algae biomass, and from there the crude algae oil, which can be used as a sustainable aviation fuel in the aviation industry.
The event was followed by a thought-provoking panel discussion on the topic, what does business owe the world? Decarbonization Agenda 2030.
We need to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by end of this century. In order to do that, we will need to halve our GHG emissions by 2030, and we need to be net carbon zero by 2050. But if you see the current set of efforts which are going on, including all the policies being formed by different governments globally, we will be able to limit the global warming only to 2.7 degrees Celsius versus the 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we are only halfway through that journey. There is a lot more which needs to be done.
Actually, quite a lot is happening. Whether it is a government sector or a private sector, action is being taken. Most likely the action is around what the other gentleman spoke about, having electric vehicles, for example, constructing green buildings. But most of it is around sourcing green, clean energy. That's basically, and then after you obtain that energy, use it very, very efficiently. So very specifically talking about Tetra Pak, we also have solar panels in our site in Chakan, which is the only IBCM, whatever certified site in India, where 2 megawatts is generated today, 1 megawatt will be generated by the end of the year now. So a lot of those things, scope 1, scope 2 emissions, which are in direct control of the operations that we are able to do. Where it gets more tricky is scope 3 emissions, because not all of it is in your control. Some of it is upstream to you, some of it is downstream to you. For example, in the FMCG industry, whenever you pack liquid food, you would need some polymer or the other, some quantity or the other. So now polymer being fossil fuel based, the first thing we need to do is move away from polymer if it's possible, move to paper based packaging, which is what Tetra Pak is out in the market with. But if it is not possible, then use the polymer which is recycled. Now, not always it is possible, but that's something you should aim for. So that's the upstream part. When it comes to downstream, this is where, for example, FMCG industry, the customer operations, the brand owners operations, which are outside the control of Tetra Pak as an example, that's where it is difficult, but that's where technological intervention will help. So that's where we have, for example, replaced hydrogen peroxide, which has been used for many years for sterilizing packaging material, with E-beam. Or we have energy efficient systems which will reduce the power consumption by 50%, reduce the water consumption by 67%, and so on.
We have set up urban living labs in partnership with Danish government in Goa for smart mobility, for lake restoration, for setting an example on how to design those roads for people to walk on and not for vehicles. So the whole thinking is changing. The alignment of values of how sustainability should be at the focus of our own living is coming back. So I have no doubt with the legacy that we have on sustainability and with these great partnerships where we can draw upon those lessons, India is on a great journey, and we are, as engineering consultancy firm, we are looking forward to partnering with all those initiatives and making this a success. And maybe very soon we would review 2070. Should that be our goal, or should we advance it? Are we maybe capable of doing it in 2050? So I think with all these capabilities that we have, you saw most of the government officers who showed phenomenal success has happened. Yesterday in the curtain raiser, we heard Ms. Samadar speak about what she has been doing in the rural hinterland. Phenomenal success. I think it is more visible in the semi-urban and rural part of India rather than in the urban setup. So I would say I'm very, very optimistic about the journey that India is taking.
In line, the event was followed by a fireside chat, turning goals into opportunities, advance sustainability as a business imperative.
Hindalco is the only aluminum company in the world to be in the the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for 2 consecutive years, right? And that's a phenomenal achievement coming on from an Indian company, and with the constraints that we work. So just want to get some views from you as to how did you chart this journey? What has your journey been like?
We are what we say a hard to abate sector. And that's because, aluminium, actually when you buy a ton of aluminium, half of what you buy is power.
Yeah.
So it's a very power intensive. So I think that, if you're going to make a dent in the carbon emissions, then the hard to abate sectors have to take a leading role. The rest of the guys, all your efforts are very valuable, but when you actually do the math, if you have to meaningfully, it's then the cement, aluminium, steel, these are the sectors that have to move ahead. So I think we were very conscious right from the beginning that, I tend to go and present a lot, and the brickbats that are thrown at me is you come from India and 90% of your power is coal. And I get that quite often, and that's why The first message I wanted to tell is every time we talk about sustainability, we seem to then just come down to carbon emissions. Let me tell you that whether it's the Dow Jones, whether it's Sustainalytics, whether it's MSCI, sustainability is a lot more than just carbon emissions. Because if it was just carbon emissions, we would not have been ranked number one.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you have to realize is that companies like us in India, where we rank and do much better than most Western companies, is on zero water discharge, waste going to landfill, improvement in biodiversity, the S part of ESG. So this is where the Aditya Birla Group and Hindalco, when they see the amount of efforts we have put in, we rank much higher than an Alcoa, Norsk Hydro and many of these other companies. The weak part for us in India is our power source. So I think that's the first, you have to put that on the table and you can't dance around it, that 90% of the power in India comes from coal. And hence, when it comes to carbon emissions, this is where we have practically the biggest challenge. And of course, companies like us have got, we have committed to net zero.
Yes.
And I try to remind people that net zero doesn't mean zero emissions. It means that you will have emissions and you would have offsets to make it a net zero. So some more misconceptions to clear up. But we have quite a lot of efforts, and actually I'm here today because one of our partners is Greenco, and we are working on many alternatives to get different sources of power than coal. So as a combination of all our efforts, including carbon emissions, that's how we have been ranked as number one.
I have been in India since 2014, and I came to study the beautiful biodiversity of this country in the hopes that I could learn through my own research how to better sustain our ecosystems. And in 2015, I started doing research in Sikkim, and I was working in this beautiful rhododendron-covered valley. And the next year when I came back, it was gone. It was completely plowed over for development, and all of the flowers and the birds and the bees and everything were gone. And I made a decision. Either I could continue being a scientist and doing research and watching all the ecosystems in India just slowly disappeared, or I could try to work with others and try to generate better discussions about how to preserve our human and environmental ecosystems. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm really, really honored to be with these amazing people and have a conversation between us and also with you about this issue.
In the Asia Pacific region, $1.5 trillion was the estimate. For India, it was about 6.5% of incremental GDP spent per annum, and these are pre-pandemic estimates. So these are huge numbers, but they sort of pale in comparison when you look at the resource base that's available. The fact that there's $50 trillion of assets under management in the Asia Pacific region. So the question has never been about a lack of resources. The question is always about the political will, the market pressures, the incentives to actually catalyze more investing, and to reorient the flow of capital to one that is driven not just by profits or economic benefits, but the concept of a double or a triple bottom line. Many of you might know child marriage is a major issue in India. More than 23% of girls are in fact married before they turn 18. So it is a big issue in the country. So what the global program actually does is looking at it from an integrated development perspective, different outcomes. So the interventions are actually aimed at changing the patriarchal norms which are existing, enhancing access to quality and safe education, increasing the access to quality health services, providing avenues for economic development and livelihood opportunities, empowerment of adolescent girls and boys through life skills education. These are the 21st century skills. And also working with policymakers to create laws so there is an enabling environment as well. So through that, working on different verticals, we are able to actually address child marriage and actually prevent child marriage, and more importantly, prevent teenage pregnancies as well.
The second episode of the fourth edition of the Economic Times Global Sustainability Alliance SDG Summit culminated on high-voltage discussions, pride and a sense of achievement. Though the curtains on the show had downed, but the search for excellence by the Times crew will go on.